That's right, Jeffrey Dahmer. If you're a fan of true crime and you haven't heard of Jeffrey Dahmer, girl, where the heck have you been? We're talking crazy, barrels full of acid man. And if you haven't heard about him, you need to get in contact with your internet provider and tell them to stop blocking the information on the Milwaukee Cannibal. Now, for everyone else, Jeffrey Dahmer is one of the heavy hitters of the serial killer world in terms of victims, how he did it, all those sorts of things that interest true crime enthusiasts. Because this guy really is a bowl of Fruit Loops. It could be argued that he is the most popular serial killer out there today in terms of interest from the true crime community. He's so loopy that his fruitcake is not missing its nuts. The cake is made out of pure, unadulterated insanity. Now, you don't need me to go over the story of Dahmer. There's plenty of stuff out there. There's the film, there's the books, My Friend Dahmer. There's true crime podcasts, true crime documentaries, A&E documentaries, you name it. There is 5 million channels which could possibly tell you about Jeffrey Dahmer's life and his crimes and what he was doing and how he got around to doing what he was doing. But there is one part of the Dahmer story that I don't feel has actually been touched upon or even vaguely explored. It's only sort of mentioned flippantly every so often. That Jeffrey Dahmer's favourite film was The Exorcist III.
Real terror is back. George C. Scott in William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist III.
And so, fellow sickos, we're going to be having a look today in this video at The Exorcist III in particular. Dahmer actually said of his film and his relation to his crimes that he watched The Exorcist III to get into the right mood. Now, to a murderer, that makes total sense. But to your average person that doesn't understand why you would go out committing murders and killing people and dissolving them in big barrels, what's the right mood? Well, he did say that he had particular characters in those films that he was drawn to. And in The Exorcist III, if you've watched it, the only one that fits that bill who's a serial killer in that film is the Gemini Killer. Now, it's interesting about the Gemini Killer because the Gemini Killer isn't actually the Gemini Killer. In the film, the Gemini Killer is the spirit of the Gemini Killer who had been killed, I think it was in the executioner's chair, like the electric chair or something, and had been placed into the body of Father Karras. Now, Father Karras was from the first Exorcist film, and he was the one that successfully exorcised Reagan and then lobbed himself out of a window down the longest stairs ever, resulting in his death. Now, Dahmer didn't explicitly say that the Gemini Killer was the character that he was focusing on, but come on, it's a serial killer who is absolutely crazy in a film which is a big detective story. Who else is Jeffrey Dahmer going to have picked? I mean, you'd have to be as loopy as Dahmer to think that this guy's a good role model in any aspect. Now, I'm going to play a clip of the video of the Gemini Killer so you can just sort of get a little bit of a taster of what the Gemini Killer is like in terms of his attitude, in terms of his presentation, and a little bit of the background of him. Hair in my mouth.
A decapitated head can continue to see for approximately 20 seconds. So when I have one that's cocking, I always hold it up so that it can see its body. It's a little extra I throw in for no added charge.
I must admit it makes me chuckle every time.
Now, from this, the first thing that really stands out about him is a little bit of the backstory of the character, which is that I've said before that he's not actually the Gemini Killer. He is only the Gemini Killer in spirit alone, and the body is actually in the body of Father Karras. So you can already see there's that split going on, and there is a specific scene in the film where the murders are brought up, and he goes from being played by the actor that was playing Father Karras, unfortunately I can't remember his name, but then the second the murders are mentioned and they say it can't be the Gemini Killer's murders because he's dead, that's when the real big shift comes in and the total change in the character and the actor. So it's suddenly out of nowhere, he starts screaming and he becomes the wonderful Brad Dourif. Be still, my beating heart.
No, I am not! I'm alive!
The swift and sudden change in the character, just like that, is Dahmer's MO to an absolute T. One of the survivors of Dahmer was Tracy Edwards, and Tracy Edwards, in interviews afterwards, described Dahmer as shifting or changing. The second he closed the door, he just turned around and had a different look on his face. He was standing differently. So take one look at the Gemini Killer, who does exactly that in that scene. You can pretty much guarantee that that's what he would be doing in real life if he had got you in your apartment. You also have to remember that in order to be able to commit any of these murders, Jeffrey Dahmer had to get blind drunk. Absolutely blind drunk. And, I mean, when I get blind drunk, all I do is try to solve the JonBenet Ramsey case. You know, slightly less metal. But it does mean that you can see that in his inebriated state of mind, it's way easier to break down those boundaries between knowing who you are and giving into this sort of mental entity that you've created of yourself. The murderer persona of Jeffrey Dahmer. Tasty wine. Now, that's all good and everything, you know, the splitting of the psyche. I think most people can agree that Jeffrey Dahmer and most killers that aren't total psychopaths who lack empathy, most of them are definitely splitting at some point in terms of psychic, like in their psyche. So I would say the one defining characteristic of the Gemini Killer is, especially the more attractive side of it, is that the Gemini Killer himself, the spirit, at no point has an empathic side to him. At no point is related to people, relates to their experiences, cares about their pain. He demonstrates nothing but absolute callousness and I beheaded a priest and it was awesome level of attitude.
I must admit it makes me chuckle every time.
And the one thing that we know that Dahmer said was a real problem for him was the fact that he needed to be drunk and he needed to have drugged and incapacitated his victim because he didn't want to cause pain. He absolutely just wanted the dead body, or at least dead-ish body, when he tried to create zombies. And I think the fact that we know that Dahmer must have had empathy to some degree when he wasn't blind drunk makes him even more of an enigma than he starts out to be. Because it makes you think, how on earth can somebody that feels bad and has an empathic link to people when he talks to them, you know, when he wasn't killing people or in his apartment or blind drunk and he was working at the chocolate factory or went to the shop or anything, he acted just like you and me. So considering he had this, it kind of makes sense as to why he was an alcoholic and why he had to drug them. He had to diminish his sense of empathy for his victim. And in fact, there was another victim who was able to escape by just talking to Dahmer and presenting himself as a real human being rather than the object he wanted him to be. In summary, my thesis is that Dahmer imagined himself as possessed. He was a possessed man. That the second that door closed and he had enough alcohol in him and he knew he had the drugs to drug somebody and the Exorcist III was playing in the background because he's a psycho, that was it. He was able to become possessed by his version of the Gemini Killer in his own mind. It does mean that realistically, even today, if Dahmer hadn't been killed in prison, somebody with that serious degree of splitting in their psyche, nope, they will never get a release, because you have no idea what sort of triggers are going to set off somebody to split from their psyche and become crazy psycho man. Now, despite The Exorcist III being one of Jeffrey Dahmer's favourite movies, if not his favourite movie, I've got to say it's a really good film and you should check it out if you haven't seen it. It's really, really good and it's got probably the best jump scare I've ever seen in a movie. So definitely check it out if you haven't seen it already. Just don't get blind drunk and start murdering people afterwards. So what are your theories on Jeffrey Dahmer? Do you think he was splitting in order to be able to do the murders? Or do you think there was something else at play? Leave your theories in the comment section below. This is my first video ever on YouTube and I'm hoping to make more as they come up and everything. So if you have any suggestions or you want specific content to be covered, I will get my sleuthing hat on and try and work it out for you. Until then, there's some fantastic other areas that you can go. You can go to True Wine and Crime, which is an online blog, and it's fantastic. Real great rundown of different murders and things, and updated regularly. Thank you, fellow sickos, and don't go out murdering.